New information tonight in the mystery surrounding a Henderson man who's been searching for his identity.
The strange saga started back in 1964 when a newborn named Paul Franczak was kidnapped from a Chicago hospital. A year and a half later, a toddler found abandoned in New Jersey was delivered over to the Franczaks, who raised him as their missing son. But as an adult, Paul Franczak learned he was not related to the family. The I-Team first broke the story a few years ago, and as reported last week, Paul has now learned his name at birth. Tonight, George Knapp has another update, along with questions about what the FBI has done with the case.
So I feel kind of like Scott Bakula in Quantum Leap. I'm just popping into all these different lives, you know. I'm going to stay Paul. At least for now.
Since he started the search for his true identity almost 3 years ago, Paul Franczak has learned he's had 3 names. Paul, the name he's known most of his life after being adopted into the Franczak family of Chicago. Prior to that, he was Scott McKinley, the name given to him by the state when he was found abandoned on a sidewalk in Newark, New Jersey. And now there's Jack, his name at birth, a discovery made recently with the help of a company named DNA Detectives. He's also learned another dark truth. He had a twin sister named Jill, who seems to have vanished. Franczak says he's been in touch with his blood relatives, including siblings, most of whom didn't know the twins were ever born.
And luckily, we were able to access my birth certificate and Jill's birth certificate. She was born first, about 6 minutes before me. That's the only proof that the twins ever existed.
The more he learns, the stranger the story gets. He now knows his family name, birth date, birthplace, and names of relatives, but has no idea what became of his sister or why he was dropped off on a street corner as a boy. Franczak worked with C.C. Moore, whose company, the DNA Detectives, took the lead on the investigation and finally broke it wide open by using DNA evidence, but also old-fashioned shoe leather detective work. The decision was made to withhold some details for now because of privacy concerns and because the story takes some very dark twists.
There's been one after another ups and downs in this case. I'm sure it has been incredibly difficult for Paul and everybody involved. I can tell you, when you finally get to hear the details of this story, you'll agree with me that it's just incredible.
After the I-Team first broke the story that Paul Franczak wasn't who he thought he was, CBS News and Chicago newspapers rekindled public interest in the case, which spurred the FBI to reopen the original investigation into the 1964 kidnapping of the real Paul Franczak from a hospital in Chicago. Franczak was excited to think the FBI might not only help him find his birth family, but also figure out what happened to the real Paul. Since then, his hopes have fizzled.
Has there been any contact? Have they done any work that you know of?
To be honest with you, I don't think they've done anything. They haven't helped me at all. When I did call them, never returned my calls. I don't think they even uploaded my DNA into the CODIS.
During the many months after he was found on a street corner, young Paul, then known as Scott McKinley, was studied by the FBI as part of its nationwide investigation. Looking back on it now, Franczak thinks the agency had to know he wasn't the real baby Paul, but he was turned over to the Franczaks anyway.
Janet, the lady that had me in the foster home, remembered them studying me, you know, behavioral specialists and everything. There's no way that I was 2. Right, 2 years old. I was talking, and I'm sure I was doing things, saying things that would have totally cleared the way that I was not Paul Franczak.
The age just wasn't right.
The age wasn't right. Nothing was right, except the years.
2 years ago, with a notarized statement from Paul Franczak, we filed a public records request with the FBI asking for their files in the case. Under the Freedom of Information Act, the FBI can withhold files related to an active investigation, so the Bureau hasn't released anything. It's also a matter of policy that the FBI does not comment on open investigations. Paul Franczak wonders if the case was reopened as a way to make sure the files are kept closed to the public. George Knapp, 8 News Now.
Paul Franczak called last night and told us after our promotional spots for this report aired on the weekend, the FBI reached out to Dora Franczak. It was the first contact in 2 years. George will have further updates as new information emerges.